Hello, everyone. Well, you know who it is. It's Glams. So, I wanted to come out today and see my audience and talk to you guys. And really, the reason that I'm doing this is because I think that you know relationships are really difficult, and I think I talk about that a lot. And you know, I think that something that's been a staggering, you know, uh, something that's come to my attention a lot more recently is the rates of um, domestic abuse and homelessness. Right, so um, it's really interesting just how those two correlate. And with inflation and just the country kind of being in a little bit of an upheaval, I think right now politically, um, that's when things can get rough, with your significant other. And, a lot of times we think that domestic abuse happens just with men and women or men to women, and that's not true. So, I think it's good to debunk some of these myths and talk about, the real deal, which is, anybody who has used anger or um, aggressive behavior as a way to solve their problems, can be prone to, or who has been shown that, growing up, can be prone to, you know, doing that as in their adult life. And so, what I want to do is I want to bring awareness, and I want to bring some positivity, and just, just a calm conversation that we can talk about, the effects of this with people all over the world that live with it every single day. And really, I want to talk about men who possibly use this as um, a way to cope with their lives or whatever. I want to talk about ways that you can find resources and support, because I don't feel like there's really anything out there. I think the only thing we do for men is put them in jail or whatever, and we tell women or the abused person, we say, stay away from them. Well, that is, in theory, that's, on paper, right? That, that looks good, right? And that's a simple answer. But things are much more complicated than that. And when you have children involved, when you have somebody who is the breadwinner, when you have, um, you know, when you don't necessarily live in America, when you live in a culture that's not really seen as something um, bad, it gets harder and harder to look for ways to stop that behavior. And if you know that what you're doing is not right, um, and again, this is a really complicated issue because I've seen people. I mean, I've heard women actually say before that they provoke, their husbands or whatever, because they like getting, um, hit or smacked or whatever. So again, this can go in many directions, and so we're going to try to just keep it, um, focused on resources that you can use to help yourself when it feels ugly to you. It's it's a cycle, and it's an easy cycle to get sucked into on both sides, right? Because when somebody has an abusive personality, sometimes it's because they're insecure and don't have control. And so it's really easy to start recognizing when that person is going to do something, or use their aggression, towards you. And sometimes, you know, I know even with my child, she would say, I just wanted to see what you were, what it was going to take to get you to, you know, uh, hit me, or if you were going to, or whatever that looks like, right? And sometimes it becomes an addiction on both sides, really. So I just want to, it is a sensitive topic, and I don't want to go too far deep into it because I think, like I said, we can go many directions. But today, what I want to do is just bring awareness. I want to talk, have this be like a little bit ASMR-y, where, we can just, use this time to relax and just to take our stress away, to work on healing ourselves. And sometimes that's really difficult. But the thing I think about relationships is that as human beings, we are not good at self regulation, right? We're just really not. And so oftentimes we pick a partner that we think is going to quote unquote keep us in line, right? Even though really it's not our partner's responsibility. Our partner has their own life to deal with. And oftentimes our partner wants to be with us because we also bring things, to the table that help our partner either, um, you know, uh, that support our partner, or sometimes, we're so nitpicky with our partners that, um, we get into this uh, cadence of constantly picking and whatever, and we become reliant on that, really. It's like if we don't have that person standing over our shoulder, peering down at us, telling us, we're about to fail, it's like we don't know what to do. And that's kind of like, when you're a kid, your parents are always standing there like, you know, some parents are helicopter parents, right? Like I was really a helicopter parent for until my daughter got into like kindergarten, and then I really started asking her to think about things for herself. And that is something that's really difficult. And I never thought that that was difficult until my kid left home, because I was so used to taking care of somebody else all the time. All of a sudden, I realized I really always put myself last. And that happens a lot of times with couples. They go through it sometime, when there's like empty nest syndrome and they're learning about each other again. A lot of times they get divorced, or sometimes, as they grow older, when one person passes away, it's not too, because you're so reliant on that person every day, for whether it's to lift you up or bring you down or whatever it is. We become, kind of our brother's keeper, for lack of a better word. And I think that that's a human element about just being human, is that, we need guardrails, right? Not just kids. Every human. If we didn't have the government, if we didn't have driving laws, if we didn't have, um, you know, communities, if we didn't have structure, right, in society, then we would um, we would we would seek it out in some way, shape, or form, because there's always going to be leaders and there's always going to be people who tend to follow, right? Always. That's just human nature. And leaders tend to be, you know, they tend to not ask for help, carry a lot of stuff on their shoulders without ever, you know, they never, they try to never break. And there's just all kinds of, things that can happen to both leaders and followers. But um, the bottom line is that when you have a relationship with somebody, whether or not it's with the same sex or whatever, right? When you're building a relationship with another human being and you're going through trials and tribulations and all of those things, you build boundaries, and you build allowances, right, with each other for certain things, or um, and of course, as humans, we push those boundaries, right? So I think that as people, we forget a lot of times that, because I know for myself, I generally pick people to be my quote unquote partner, um, that are completely opposite of me. And I think that there's, I think that I see a lot of myself in that person. And that at one point, if somebody hadn't invested any time in me, I wouldn't, be where I am today, which, you know, it's okay to go through life and do everything quote unquote right, and then get to a point where you're unsure and you're uncertain. And I think that it's really, really hard when we've done things a certain way with our partners or whatever to go back and say, I'm not sure. I don't know the answer. I don't know. And I think it's even harder for men to do that because it's not nurtured in the constructs of society that we live in. Men are supposed to man up, they're supposed to provide, and that's just, so what you have in a situation like that is you have a lot of men who negate their responsibilities, they become complacent, they become quote unquote players, because that's too much pressure, right? But the same for women, right? So, you put all this pressure on women where we have to organize the household, we have to organize the personalities, we have to plan everything for everybody, we have to know everybody's schedule, we have to, and it gets overwhelming. But it's like, if we express that, to our partner, it's like, well, I mean, oh, so you can't handle it? You can't handle your job? I mean, how difficult can it be to drive, 3 kids to school every day and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's not the driving the kids to school, right? It's every single little tiny thing that's involved in getting them out the door. It's every little thing, and also to take care of yourself. You want your coffee, you want all the things to help you stay focused and alert and, in the best mood you can be with your kids. And if you don't have some of those things, you feel like you're about to have a nervous breakdown. And, but then it's like, there's so much pressure when you're raising kids and stuff on both sides, to look the part, play the part, have the right house, have the right everything. And it becomes, sometimes it can get to a point where it's a boiling pot that's about to, boil over. And oftentimes it does. And what happens is you get, people that are using their hands and their fists and everything else to deal with their problems. And I think that more and more it's actually happening with women to men. and I'll be honest about that. And I don't think but I just wanted to say that. So in the job I do, there was a gentleman who, I got to know, uh, a little bit more than I think just, an average person. And he was a police officer in Connecticut for 25 years and he retired. And I asked him, I said, so how many, I said, can I ask you some honest questions? And he said, yeah. I said, so how often would you say you would go to a domestic call? He said about 89% of the time, the calls that he got were domestic abuse. And I said, so how many out of those, calls that you went to, how often was alcohol involved in those? And he said about 99.9% of the time. Right. And he said, and it wasn't just one person drinking, it was usually both of them. Oftentimes, he said, not always, but oftentimes it was. And he said, so, um, and he made a really interesting point about how, and they talk about this, right? When we're in school and stuff, and they're talking about drugs and alcohol, they talk about how a man processes alcohol versus a woman. And the thing about that is that the hormones, the synapses and stuff like that, that is affecting while your body is trying to break down the substance, right? And because of the way that our bodies, I mean, men and women are so different in how their hormones process things, right? I mean, we really are. And I note these things all the time. It's like something that's not that big of a deal to a guy. It feels like such a violation to a woman, and even and vice versa, right? Okay. So for instance, um, a guy has had a couple drinks and he's at his girlfriend's parents' house. And his mom and dad get up to take the dishes or whatever. And he says, your mom is really hot. Okay. Okay. So he's just, had a couple drinks and he doesn't mean, of course, I'm sure that, we all know. But to a girl, depending on how old she is and stuff, right? And depending on her relationship with her mom, all kinds of things. That one comment could absolutely send her into, and she's not just mad at him, she's mad at her mom, she's mad at the whole situation. Now she doesn't want to take him over there anymore. And, he's sitting there like, even when he's sober, he's like, I don't understand, it's like, I mean, I told her that her friend, whatever, Kate was cute or whatever. I didn't understand, she was totally fine with that. I mean, I didn't think, but from a woman's perspective, you say something like that to her, especially about her mom, right? And if you don't know anything about the mom, if the mom, if you don't know, but that can that can be something that can be a point of contention for till the end of the marriage, until the day you two die, if you end up getting married or something, because you just don't know, the relationships between mothers and daughters can be really strange. And when you say something like that to somebody, it can be, and the other thing is, another one is, without knowing anything or whatever, and, you're just being a friendly guy, and maybe you don't care that much about a girl and you're at her parents' house and you kind of give her mom like a hint that, you'd be open to something like that, and you don't know anything about, and the mom like loses her mind, or she's like, yeah, I'm totally open to that. Like, I don't care about my daughter. Let's do that. Um, you know, that's something that, you know, it can be that stuff like that can lead to, violence. honestly. Um, but those are things that are seen completely different because women, for the most part, do not understand how strong a, a drive a man has to procreate. And I mean, to procreate. So it doesn't matter if it's a rock or a person or, if their, you know, um, hormones start going, it's really hard to turn that off. And I don't think women really understand that. But, something I say often is to men is, just because you're thinking it doesn't mean you actually have to say it, right? And I know for myself personally, I can have a really wicked tongue, and hurt people's feelings when I say things. And the same thing for me, right? Because sometimes the things that I say can incite somebody to really piss them off and I'm just thinking about getting my feelings out. But again, if somebody's been drinking, you have no idea how they are going to interpret that, right? And especially when both of you have been drinking, it's little tiny stuff like that that you hear in a certain way that just lights you under your, feet, and you lose it. And I mean, I have too. Um, it's interesting. Somebody I know, can get really loud and aggressive. And one time I got loud and aggressive, and it like startled him, and he literally ran out my door. And I thought, well, that's really strange. And that's just a simple level of like self-awareness, right? Because he has no idea. He kind of does, but he doesn't put any thought into. He just, that's a way that he's gotten people's attention in the past. And so he uses that aggressive nature. It doesn't matter who it's around or whatever. And usually people jump and they um, abide, right? Well, that's not, So what I want to talk about a little bit is, if you're a guy and you're in a situation where you're feeling like, because I have a friend who, got divorced from his wife, and because she was an alcoholic and she was so abusive when she would drink. Sorry about that. And so, it was just really at a point where, I mean, they had to separate and stuff. And she, I don't really know her at all. But it would only happen when she was drunk, and it was really like aggressive. She would just really start beating the heck out of him. And so when he ended up, they ended up going to the divorce lawyer and everything. They removed her from the household, and that was really like devastating to her. And because that normally doesn't happen. But I mean, it's serious, and it's not okay to do that to somebody. It's really not. Um, and it really like destroyed him. I mean, this man ended up being addicted to drugs and alcohol himself afterwards, and had to go to Chicago to his parents' house when his son was a teenager, and get sober and stuff, because the whole thing as a man, it was very he felt like unworthy and like like a sissy or something, right? And so what? I mean, that it's not okay for anybody to hit anybody, in my opinion. It's not okay just because and if a woman starts, hitting you, um, it's not okay to keep letting her do that. It's not okay. Because what happens is your kids see that, and everybody's affected when people start putting their hands on each other. Your animals run, or they start barking or getting upset. I mean, it really start. Anytime you have people that start doing that, when you're around um, living beings, whether they're people or not, it it people are animals are visibly get upset when people start lashing out at each other, because it's the most part, it's really not that necessary. You know, I mean, it's it's a sign of insecurity and immaturity, and somebody who's going to let somebody else's words affect them. Now, when the person has been drinking and stuff, it's really difficult to, you know, you can say nothing and it can lead to something major, right? Um, so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. And as a man, if that's something that you feel, that you're facing, either you do that yourself or your partner does that to you, um, I think if you're uncomfortable talking to your partner about it, I think it's really good to bounce ideas off of like a professional. I don't necessarily know if a therapist always is the right, you know, person, because sometimes therapists have really strange motivations, or they've experienced something in their own lives, and it's hard to be like unbiased and stuff. But um, sometimes I think like a support group, or something like that can be really helpful in situations like these, or um, you know somebody that you trust, that possibly has experienced this person that way, because it's really hard to explain, because when we're telling somebody something that just blows our mind away, that we can't believe that somebody treated us a certain way, sometimes I'm an amazing yarn spinner, and I tell people exactly how I saw it, but I'm a very emotional, um, very explicit person, so I go into great detail with everything, and that's one of the reasons why I'm an amazing storyteller. But in certain situations, when you're, you know sometimes, and I know this happens with kids and parents, the way that we remember things is not always the way that they happen, right? It's the way that we felt at the moment, and it's the way that we took it, but sometimes it's not exactly the way that it happened. So, these situations can be biased. And so I just think it's good to, because I have another friend, right, who I'm actually no longer friends with, who him and his husband have been together for quite some time. Um, but, my friend is an alcoholic, and when he drinks, and his husband questions him or anything like that, it they've thrown coffee in each other's faces, and usually it get what my friend was always looking for was a way to leave the situation so he could go and drink. That's what he was looking for. So if he felt like it was time for him to go on like a bender, he would provoke those situations, knowing well that how his partner was going to react, and that's what he was looking for every single time, right? So a lot of times, and my advice to his partner is, don't be with an alcoholic, because he's not going to stop abusing you until he stops drinking. And if he doesn't want to stop drinking, he's not going to. He's always going to have that secret, and you guys are always going to be sitting around waiting for that ball to drop, for when he's going to, get on his bender. And that's when he loses it. And he's lost it on me and other people too. So, and I just had to stop being friends with him, because I don't support him beating up his husband in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not going to sit there and continue being friends with him, when that's how he treats another person. When that's, he has an alcohol problem. That's the problem, right? So, I'll tell you another funny story is that, so I have a pretty, dirty mouth at times, not just sharp tongue, but, and I don't know how it happened, but it was like when I was 6 years old, and I don't, we, we like block things out as kids or whatever to deal with the trauma. But I know that my dad was, abusive with my mom, because I remember him hitting her when we were in Jamaica one time. And so I don't know, something must have happened between them or whatever. But he must have said a bunch of things to her or something. But I had the dirtiest mouth in the neighborhood after that. I mean, I would just go around and I was so afraid that somebody was going to tell my parents on me, because they were going through like a separation and a divorce and stuff at that time. But the kids in the neighborhood's parents didn't want them to play with me because I had such a dirty mouth. And I have no idea where it came from, but it was something like that happened. I know because, um, you know, I just, it just, kids don't just wake up one day and have a dirty mouth. It wasn't like a movie I watched or something. It was something. Um, and again, we block things out to deal with trauma in our lives and stuff like that. And so, um, you know, that's the thing is when you get together with somebody, you have no idea what they've been through. And if you don't have a partner who wants to get up every day and support your purpose, who asks you, what things you love, um, gets excited for you when you have um, wonderful moments and cries with you when you are down. I remember my daughter's dad. Um, I was upset one time and crying about something, and I just had these big alligator tears. And he was trying to, it was hard for him because he didn't really know what to do. He wasn't equipped to deal with the types of, stuff that I had. And I, at this point now in my life, I am on medication, but at that point I wasn't. And, he was an alcoholic. And so, there was a lot of fighting. But I remember he just sat there and like kissed every single one of my tears that fell down my face. And, and he was like obsessed with my eyes, and he always wanted, he would ask if he could like lick my eyeball and stuff. I mean, totally just in like a situation like this, where he was trying to like be funny and um, but he really didn't know how to handle that because nobody had ever really been loving to him until I was with him. And he honestly, sometimes I came from a very loving family that like we kiss. I kiss my dog constantly. I'm always kissing on her and loving on her. And I was with my kid, and I was with my stepson, and I was with my ex very much. And he had never ever experienced something like that. So when he would be drunk and we would be fighting, and the thought would come into his head like that I would be doing that with somebody else. That was very very scary for him, and it would cause him to get violent. Um, and then of course the next day I feel like a lot of times he'd end up going to jail and everything because he tried fighting cops, all kinds of stuff, and this man was 5'7". So it it can have and when he would try to do that stuff with me, I say, excuse me. I mean, I was like, it got pretty rough sometimes. So um, but he was a very controlling person because he didn't have a lot of self-control, and that's what happens. And I just didn't put up with it. I was like, you're not going to tell me what to do. So it would cause problems. And back then I drank too. I drank not as much as him, but I drink a lot. And that's two people that really are he needed to be medicated in my opinion because he ended up having what I think is schizophrenia. It wasn't necessarily diagnosed, but and that can happen. Um, and that's the thing is if you don't get mental help for things that are bothering you, and you have a partner who pushes you to your limit, that can be extremely toxic, extremely. And it's difficult to leave, and it's difficult to to talk about going to therapy and getting help. But I mean, if you want to have a good life and you want to have a relationship where you guys are growing, I think that that's really important, really. So I just wanted to have this little live today, just as a way to reconnect with some of my subscribers and fans and stuff. Really, I was promoting uh, support for domestic violence victims in the town that I live in, because I think that it happens a lot. So if you guys, watch this and you feel compelled, to leave a tip or anything like that, that is all going to go to uh, the Victims Advocate Fund for Denver County. And the reason is because, sorry, I don't know why that's so loud. I apologize. And the reason is because there's just there's not a lot of funding available for people who need resources, um, especially like trans people and stuff. And so, and I see the desperation that's needed at times. I've been working, well, volunteering um, with some of these situations and some organizations. And, a lot of times the people that work in these places really aren't equipped to handle this stuff either. The people that answer the lines and the suicide lines and stuff like that, um, they're trained, but it's difficult. And so there just needs to be more resources all around. It's not something we really should be hiding in society. It's something that we should be talking about and have places where people, especially abusers, can go to get help. There's nothing out there really. If you are struggling as an abuser in a violent relationship, where do you go? You just wait until you do it again and then you go to jail. Jail's not a rehabilitation place. That's a place that you know, that's a lot of times, a place that, you can relax for a little bit, and, I know people who make millions of dollars incarcerated. Um, so it depends on, and again, sometimes that's the person's goal. People have all kinds of motives. So if you find yourself, in a situation like this, or you come across somebody who, maybe needs some help, you know, um, offer them, you know, some assistance. I guess I don't really know in every state. I feel like the state that I live in, there's really no help. I mean, there's like immediate help, possibly, but the problem is that when you're seen as a victim, people look at you as like a half dead bird, and nobody really wants to help a half dead bird. They want you to get up and help yourself. And that's why they make these programs, in my opinion, so difficult, because it's like, well, do you really want to get out of this? And, you have to make the choice. But everybody needs a little help sometimes, right? Everybody. I mean, sometimes you just don't, it took me years, and 13 years of therapy to even get to a point where I admitted that I was in an abusive relationship. Because since I was bigger than him and stuff, I was like, well, it wasn't abusive because I could hit back. That's not true. That abuse is mental, physical, sexual, So it's not a topic that, any of us really like to talk about, but it's really important. If you're feeling stressed out over something like this, that you have some resources. And I'm really not sure what they are, but one thing I can say is if you do feel like this, and this grabs you, feel free to leave comments and have, a healthy conversation in my comment section, and I'll do anything I can to help get resources that you need on both sides. If you find yourself in an abusive relationship, or if you're, feeling like you're going to be abusive, or maybe you don't know, or maybe, you just want somebody to talk to. See, we look down on every person in this situation. We look down on the victim. Most it's kind of like their fault. They should have left. And we look down at the abuser. I mean, it's like, like what? This happens all the time. And the fact that we look at people this way in society, it says a lot about the skeletons in our own closets, right? So again, if you guys feel compelled, to contribute to um, people in these situations, or you feel compelled, to leave comments, or you have questions, or you have resources that you can give, I think that this is definitely a great place for a community discussion. And this is a great place for people of all genders, of all cultures, of all ages. This touches people everywhere. It doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter what gender you are. This occurs in every culture. And so it's something that, unless we talk about, we're never gonna we're never gonna heal from. And so it doesn't help to just stuff it aside and watch football on Sundays. That's not going to work, unfortunately. It's something that has to be addressed, and myself included, right? So I certainly am not taking myself out of the mix at all. And I could go into some greater detail, but I've spent, quite a bit of time in my life in abusive relationships. And I think I probably wouldn't have had it not been normalized at home. And also, had I been willing to admit that that was actually going on, right? Because nobody wants to admit that. And at the time, it was like scary to be alone. So it was like there was no alternative, right? So there is an alternative, if you care about yourself. And sometimes it's really hard to care about yourself when you've been caring for other people your whole life. And I can 100% attest to, that difficulty, because I'm still going through it right now. And as I, get through this and find, my own peace and happiness, and am able to, navigate this life, just without being responsible for tons of other people, and sometimes not knowing, what to do. I'm going to share all of those things with you guys, because I think that being human is, it's one of the most amazing characteristics of all of us, and our flaws are what make us beautiful. And, we're all on this, this platform because we like seeing people be human, right? Not robots with scripts and stuff like that. So it would be crazy, to act like these things, have never happened to anybody, or to myself, or anybody that I know. That's not true. So anyway, I've spent quite a bit of time here, talking about this stuff, and I really appreciate you guys stopping by. If you are not a subscriber and this moved you in any way, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. I have been doing a lot more, ASMR and things with my voice, because I get a lot of comments about how soothing my voice is. So I thought that this would be a really good time and topic for me to talk about, to kind of, soothe the edges, maybe, and just open up some dialogue around a really, kind of sensitive and not that comfortable of a topic. And I think when you have somebody who's willing to open up and share some of their own experiences um, and just be a listening ear as well as like a calming, supportive voice, I think that we can make really amazing changes in this world, knowing that there's somebody that, has been there. So again, if you guys want to reach out to me regarding this and you have anything specific you want to talk about or resources that you need or questions that you have for me, I really, really, really would like you to be in openness and allowing, because I think that that's how we grow as people, and that's what I want my channel to be about. So thank you so much for stopping by today, if you did. And I want to leave this time with you guys and just do a little calming exercise in bringing some inner peace and awareness to ourselves as humans. When we sit and we let thoughts in our head kind of fly by like little clouds, in the process of maybe meditation or relaxation. We can change our entire mindset and body with our vagus nerve. And the way we can do that is with our breathing. So we can do 4 breaths in, hold, and then to the count of 6 or 7, breaths out. Right. So in yoga, it's good to hear the breath, to feel the breath and acknowledge the breath, because, we are awareness. Awareness is not us. We are awareness. And when we take the time to sit and concentrate on just our breathing, or just something simple, or something that brings calmness and peace to our mental and physical awareness, we can focus and think about things in brand new ways. When we rest our minds and our bodies, we get rid of toxins that only sleep and rest can get rid of. Nothing else can. So it's important to rest, drink tons of water, and if you're going through any type of situation where you feel it's a crisis and you need some stability or help, take the time for yourself to just breathe and focus before you make any decisions, because people often like to see what we're going to do in a crisis, and lashing out never makes us feel good, whether it's verbally or physically or anything. So take some time, close a door with a lock on it, go in a bathroom, take a few minutes to just breathe. Feel your awareness. Feel your feelings. Allow yourself to acknowledge your feelings and your awareness in the moment. And let it go. It will don't try to manipulate or coerce the situation with your thoughts or feelings. Just allow awareness to take over you. And oftentimes in that moment, just the fact that we are simply aware can change the entire outcome of the situation. Just because we simply don't react, not that we don't have feelings, but we choose not to react, because in every moment we have a choice between miracles and grievances. It depends on what you see and how you see it. So we have the option, in every moment we have the choice to choose. We don't have to let people, get us irate or change our awareness. We don't even have to let them know that we acknowledge that they're doing that. We can just simply be and let life unfold in its natural way, right? Without trying or coercing or manipulating anybody with our thoughts or mind or feelings or whatever. So I would encourage you to take some time every day to feel yourself and be in full awareness and light, because at the end of the day, that's all we really have is ourselves. We come into this world like little babies, and we leave like little babies, needy and desperate, But hopefully, we have found some awareness in the time, that flash of lightning that we're here, and given our light to somebody who needed it along the way, right? I believe everybody has a very special, unique purpose for being here. And you're not supposed to keep your gift to yourself. You're supposed to share it with people, because that's what we do as human beings. We desperately need feedback from one another. So everybody has a purpose, and everyone's in your life for a purpose. Sometimes they're in your life to make you realize you don't want to be like that, or you don't want to be like that anymore, or whatever it is. But just allow the awareness to wash over you, and not try to guide the awareness, right? Because we are awareness. So I'm going to leave you with that. I thought somebody was in here. So I hope that you guys enjoyed my little, it's been a long time since I've been able to connect with my fans and subscribers here. So I hope you guys enjoyed my time. I enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you all very soon. And again, if this moved you in any way and you want to know where you can help, victims of domestic violence or whatever, or people who are homeless, I can definitely give you that information. Or again, you can donate whatever, and it will go. I can even tell you, what amounts go to where, because that's something that I feel very strongly about. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you guys soon.